I have to sit next to him.
We used to. Druids are so kind of unruly and anarchic. There's an anarchic spirit in Druidism that runs through it, and it runs through it historically and all the rest of it. And the only way to get people together in the camps when we do the camps in England is I would go outside the yurt, the big yurt, and I would shout out, "It is forbidden to enter this yurt. No one is allowed into this yurt." You'd immediately see people flocking towards it. Yeah. So, 50 years ago, I experienced the first Druid ceremony, and I joined the order, and I was invited when I was in the order to grove meetings, which at that time were above the golden egg, which years later I realized was wonderfully kind of symbolic and alchemical and all the rest of it. But at that time it was like a kind of McDonald's. The golden egg. And Newen had a office above it that he rented as part of his college. He ran a college that was distinguished by having Winston Churchill as one of the pupils at some point in time. And in these grove meetings, you know, we would begin with a ceremony, and the people who were in the directions would be allocated a task. So in the West, Tracy would be in charge of the tea because she'd be making, you know, the water. So the person in the West was, and then the person in the North was in charge of the money, taking the kind of contributions. You pay a little bit for the meeting. And then the person in the East was called the scribe. And they all had, you know, names: steward. I can't remember. You know. And here, scribe. Like the scribe was in the East, and in the East, the scribe would take the notes of the meeting. And then in the South, the person who was sitting here would be in charge of lighting the candles and the incense. So there's a sort of nice way in which these everyday practical tasks would be linked into the elements and the directions. And then we'd do a meditation, and then there would just be some talking and question and answer, discussion, and the rest of it, and then we'd finish. And so I'm going to do this session like we've done that now. We've had a little bit of a ceremony in the beginning, very simple. We won't bother with the tea because we've had lunch, that's okay. We won't bother about the money because we've paid, you know. And don't worry about writing it down, although Drew has his pen ready. So one of the things that Newen used to do, often he would fulfill that role himself, and he would draw lines. And when we talked about our experiences in meditation, he would be doing kind of diagrams. So if you mentioned seeing a pentagram in a meditation, and you mentioned seeing a pentagram, he would draw a line like that. And he'd come out with these interesting kind of geometric patterns that sometimes were significant. He'd mention, sometimes not. And so let's begin by allowing ourselves to become aware of being in a sacred grove. And of course the wonderful thing about gatherings like this is they give us the opportunity to do this for real, as it were. You know, we might be doing this at home quite a bit, but here we are with our companions around us. And we've all made journeys. I know somebody's just arrived very, very recently.
I just got it.
You have? Yes, that's right. Yeah. So the process of being in the sacred grove, opening to the sacred grove, we think of it as a process that starts in the sacred grove, but of course it starts outside of the sacred grove, the whole journey to it. And there's that journey to it of expectation, sometimes particularly with people who are new, who've never been, anxiety. You know, what on earth's going to happen? Is it going to be weird? Am I going to like it? Are they all going to be kooky and strange? So there's all sorts of kind of feelings going on. which then get layered into whatever's happening on the road and all the hassle that can happen, in traveling and all the rest of it. But nevertheless, however modern and contemporary your journey may feel, you are actually enacting this ancient process of pilgrimage, which is engaging the active nature in concert with the passive nature. So you're going somewhere with a special intention. So a retreat, a camp, a spiritual group. Immediately the intention is of a spiritual nature. I'm going for so-called spiritual reasons. And as part of my journey, my spiritual life. And you engage the will and you make the journey. So this is Excalibur. So Excalibur is raised and you're making the journey through the woods to the forest. And then when you arrive, you put down the sword and you pick up the grail, the chalice instead. And you're in this chalice-like place, the place of health, which is why when you hold a retreat or a camp, it's always important to have a place that is supportive and nurturing, and somehow conveys some of this grail-like energy, if you like. And the responsibility of the people who are putting on the event, part of their responsibility is to add to that, to encourage that sense of being welcomed and held, and the way you program the event and everything is all designed to foster that sense of being held and contained, so that something else can come in. And it's that something else that is of interest to us, because I'm sure you've all experienced it in your meditation at certain times in your life, where when you manage to be still enough and you manage to feel safe enough and just in the right place at the right time, and you open up and something comes in, and it may be something very subtle, a sense of an energy, a feeling, maybe something very specific, a very specific thought, very specific clear understanding that comes into your mind. But whatever it is, maybe even a sense of taste sometimes, an actual literal taste in your mouth. And we can call it Arwen, and that's one of the purposes of doing this work. And so now, let's just open to being here in the sacred grove. Life that's particular to this region, to this area, the particular quality of the water that is in the soil here. It's going to be very specific to this area. Creatures in the soil. And we can allow ourselves to soak in some of that energy from the earth, that healing, stabilizing energy. And as we do that, we feel some of our cares and anxieties and stresses just falling away into the earth. Bringing us a sense of calm and stability. And then we become aware of the trees around us. And of the birds in the trees, the creatures who are living in the trees, and the spirits, the living spirits of the trees themselves. And we feel blessed by these trees. We feel their calm. the way in which they don't need to do anything, say anything. We're blessed by the breeze, by the sky above us. And we breathe in the energy of the sky. And as we breathe in the energy of the sky, we feel it energizing our physical bodies, our energetic bodies. And we feel the way in which the energy of the sky meets the energy of the earth within the center of our being. And then gradually we allow ourselves to maintain this sense of being in the sacred grove. And just gently and slowly, if it's okay for you, just slowly open your eyes. And see if you can keep an awareness to the degree that's right for you. To the degree that it's okay for you to have an awareness of being in the sacred grove and an awareness of just looking out from your eyes. Seeing the trees around, your fellow companions around. When you first do this, it can seem quite strong because the visual input is so strong compared to the subtle perceptions that you have when your eyes are closed. But it's up to you. You can keep your eyes closed if you like. Keep them open, you can go in and out. We can be in this liminal space. And if we hear snoring, I'll just gently ask you to stop.
I shall bring some caffeinated tea to the circle.
Yes. So that idea of being, of maintaining your sense of being in the sacred grove or being in this slightly altered state and being in the physical state. It's something that first came to me when we were holding, it was at the time of the Hale-Bopp comet. Do you remember that? It was, I don't know when that was. That must have been about
1996.
96. Okay. So that's 10, 20 years. 20 years ago. And we were in Avebury. We had a Druid gathering in Avebury. And Avebury is a very big stone circle. It's so big, there's a village inside the stone circle. How many people have been there? You've been there. So a number of people, yeah. There's a pub, the Red Lion pub. You can sit with a pint of beer looking around at the stone circle. It's quite extraordinary. And so we had a gathering there, and we hired a village hall. And we were in our robes. There were about 30 of us, and we were in our robes. It was just for the Druid grade. So just Druid grade members, we were in our robes. And we did the light body exercise. And I just felt guided to suggest this. I was a little hesitant because it seemed a bit radical. But I suggested, I said, if you feel okay with this, just open your eyes, and then in silence, we will process out of the village hall and go into the part of the circle where the stones are, and look up at the comet and at the stars, all in silence. Do the whole thing. Have enough of awareness of your physical body, but enough, and look up, and then we'll process back in, sit down again, and then talk us down through. And we did that, and it was absolutely wonderful. Except there were a couple of teenage kids who were smoking cigarettes outside in the little street there. And they saw these 30 figures completely silent. They were sitting on the pavement smoking cigarettes. And when we came, they stubbed their cigarettes out and they kind of stood up. these figures, and nobody said, and everybody, nobody acknowledged them. I think we just walked past them. Just one. The only other time that's happened has been on Iona when we were going to do a Beltane ceremony. And we came. Who's been to Iona? Has anybody been to Iona? One, two, just two of you. The Isle of the Druids. And we, in the evening, the moon was coming up, and the stars. We went out of the hotel that was on the main drag. I mean, Iona just has one street with a hotel and about 10 little cottages, and that's the village. And we were going down to Sand Eels Bay, which is this lovely sandy bay there. And we went out, and I had suggested that everybody had picked up bits of kind of driftwood and all the rest of it. So we had our robes on, but people had sort of decorated them with weird stuff and leaves, and people were carrying bits of driftwood. And there was, and as we started walking down this little main street, a little old lady came out with her dog to take the dog for a walk, and she turned right immediately, so we were behind her. So we were all walking behind her. And she was right, and I was saying, oh, please, don't have a heart attack. You can imagine that. But the Scots are great, they're Doer people, and so when she got to the end of the promenade thing, she turned around and she didn't bat an eyelash. So we said, good evening. Good evening. So she had to say good evening to about 30 people. Good evening. So, yeah. And this ability to be in two worlds is something really that we're cultivating, I think. I mean, you could express the spiritual journey perhaps in something like this, that you go along thinking this is it. So, you go to school and, it depends when you awaken, but, you think this is it until something happens when you realize that this isn't actually all it is. It's a very wonderful moment. I mean, can anybody say when that happened for you? Was there a specific time for you where you feel like you woke up to the reality of the spiritual?
No, you have a book on you. Oh. Sorry.
Right. Thank you. Please remove them as when you can you can remember? Mm-hmm. What was it that woke you up?
I was around 9 years old, and my friend and I were in the backyard, and it was on a Good Friday. And I had a little silver cup that I'd had since I was little, and for some reason I just had this really strong impulse to get some fruit juice and told her to get some bread. And we came out to the backyard and we did this kind of mock communion thing. I mean, we were raised Christian, but in my heart that was not what I was doing. And I just felt this sense of awareness from around me. It was almost like, this is going to sound crazy, but it was like the backyard was paying attention to me. It was like the plants and everything were just like, and that was kind of, nothing was the same after that.
Yeah.
It's hard to put into words.
Hard to put into words, but that, yeah. Lovely. Does anybody else have a moment? Because they can happen in all sorts. Yeah.
I was in the backyard with my horse, and it was just a beautiful day, kind of like this, and it was a hilly area, and the wind was blowing, and there was a maple tree right there that was, the leaves were whooshing in the wind, and all of a sudden I just had this sense that everything is just interconnected, and the horse, the maple tree, me, everything, and that just stuck with me forever.
Yeah. Lovely. And that's, so however it happens, whether it happens in a kind of mystical way in terms of experience, or whether it happens from reading a book. And for me it was when I was 11 and I read a book about the life of Buddha, and it was, and then I started trying to meditate and so on. And I actually, in the same year, I met Nguyen, Leo Ross Nichols. So it can be through reading, it can be through meeting somebody, something they say, not even necessarily what they say, but just a meeting can trigger something. It can be going to a particular place. So they're like gateways. These are gateway moments or experiences. And the characteristic of it is that you realize that there's more to life and more Yes, there's more to life than the world of appearances. And whilst you might still be seduced into the world of appearances and money and all the kind of seductions that exist and all the rest of it, that memory is still there somewhere, and every so often it's reactivated. And then it's like the seasons. There'll be times where it's more intense, where that yearning for something more, or to see beyond the veil, or however you want to term it, becomes stronger, and then it may wane, and then it may become stronger again. But that's the essence, it seems to me, of what we're doing in the spiritual path. But one of the particular characteristics of the Druid way is that we are not doing that in order to escape this world. So it's not as if, it seems to me that the experience is not as if, this isn't real, that's real, I want to be over there. It's more that, there's more to reality than this. And this is why Druidry embraces nature and the natural world. And what you find is that as you walk the path is that your experiences of the inner world and the outer world can become stronger. It's not like the outer world loses its hold on you and you disappear. It's that actually both become more intense and more vivid and more magical. And so in that sense it's a magical path. And then there's a way in which what happens is you start to unleash experiences and connections and relationships that exist outside of the normal sphere of reference that other people might use. And so you start to meet people, you come into contact with ideas, you have experiences that seem to be leading you in some way. And at their most intense, they're these wonderful synchronicities that, I guess we've all experienced, where you bump into the right person at the right time. Then there comes a moment when you realize that this doesn't have to be random. You can actually help to make these experiences more frequent. A sort of psychological way of talking about it would be something like, you have some peak experiences, and you think that you just have to wait for it, like the grace of God. You might have one, you may not. But part of the magical discipline really is saying, actually, I can work to have more of it. I can actually change the way I think and feel and behave in order to increase the frequency of these experiences. And that's one way to characterize, what we're doing in the order. So we're saying, look, there's a particular journey you can take, there are exercises you can do that will increase the likelihood of your having these experiences. And one of the hard things to grasp, I think, particularly in the era we're in, is the way in which we do that by not overloading the amount of data that's coming in, because we've reached a stage, where there's so much data coming in that it's hard for us to have these experiences because there's too much email on us. I'm sorry, I don't have time for mystical experience. There's too much email to do, so the trick is in creating the spaces and the silences and the gaps. And this the lovely way in which in art and in music, the relationship between music between silence and the notes of the music are absolutely integral. And in art, the same thing between space. There's an amazing piece of music that I play sometimes on retreats, which is by a man called Taverner, John Taverner. And it's called The Icon of Eros. You can't download it, unfortunately, you have to buy the CD. But he's a composer who there's this kind of movement of music which has a kind of Balkan rhythm, almost sort of quick kind of gypsy rhythm like that. There's some drums in the background. It reaches a crescendo and then it drops into silence. And then there's this silence. And then it starts again. And he has, I've actually got it. Maybe does anybody have one of those big things you can plug into an iPad? I don't know. We could listen to it sometime.
If someone has a cord, I have a little.
If you've got one of those things, we can anyway, sometime. Yeah. Anyway, and then a lot of his music is very, very fine violins, that just take you up, up like that. It's just incredible stuff. Absolutely incredible music. And you know how when you learn graphic design, you learn how, if you're designing a flyer or something, the relationship between the black and the white is absolutely, you can't just stuff the whole page full of that stuff. And it's exactly the same thing with our mental lives and our spiritual lives as well, and our emotional lives too. Which is why the Sacred Grove is the primal kind of tool that we use, the basic tool that we learn right at the beginning, because it's just a clearing. So it's not, we don't suggest that you could say in kind of other sort of Western occult schools, they'll suggest you build a temple. Build a temple and put symbols here and all the rest of it. But with Druidry, it's very simple. It's just a clearing, and then. And so a peculiar process is going on that some people who are very academic kind of don't get with the course when they start it. It's like they want a really huge 4-course meal, and they arrive and there are just a few snacks on the table, a few, and so sometimes we have to explain to people. The mentors have to say, yes, sure. There's loads more you could say about every topic that's mentioned. You could have a book about these things. It's not the same thing as a book. It's designed to have lots of space, so that you can kind of grow in that. I was having when I was flying over, I was thinking about what to talk about with you, and I had this lovely image of a magic carpet, flying carpet. I just fly on the plane, so it's a kind of obvious image. But it's a very rich one. If you think about, imagine now you've got a little carpet underneath you, and that carpet is everybody's. If we we all opened our third eyes and looked at everybody's carpet, they'd all look different, wouldn't they? The weave would be different. And that weave would be made up of, our ancestral memories, the place that we live, the energy from the plants and the creatures, and our family life and our story, and each of those carpets would look different. But it's the carpet that's been given to us in this incarnation. So kind of as we've incarnated, the spirits have said, hey, look, have this carpet. You may not like it to begin with. You may be looking at somebody else's and thinking that's a prettier one. But this is the one for you, and you may even think it's a bit messy, or it's got some holes in it. but just trust me, you know, it's for a reason, you know, and it's okay. And so you sit on this carpet and you maybe take years feeling comfortable on it, you know, wondering, you know, whether it's adequate, whether it can really carry you, because sometimes you feel so big and so weighed down, and these carpets are quite small. I think. Don't you think? I don't know. We're not sitting on huge carpets, are we? How big? Can you just show how big is the carpet that you're sitting on using this metaphor?
2x4?
It's. Does anybody have a big? Is anybody sitting on a great big carpet? It's not. Is it? I don't know why, but it's not. It's not. It's small. It's small. Yeah. So then finally, so it, you know, so it takes years, and finally, you know, there's some stage, you know, and the awakening moment, I think, is something about realizing that it can move. It can move, you know, and it's so exciting. This can move. And has anybody had flying dreams? You know, flying dreams, aren't they extraordinary?
Yeah.
They're just so extraordinary, isn't it? You know, especially when you wake up in them, when you become lucid in a flying dream, and it's just, you know, the best. It's just incredible. So, waking up, you could say, was like realizing that the carpet can move, and then it's a question of moving one's awareness just below the carpet, just about 3 inches below it. See what happens. Imagine it. You're about 3 inches under the carpet. That's where the energy is that's moving it, isn't it? The carpet isn't moving on its own. This is my experience of the magic carpet. Yeah, it's not just going zoop like that and you're sitting on it. It's lifting up, and then it's starting to float around. I hope this isn't too obscure. This isn't too weird for you. I'm feeling really weird because I'm kind of jet lagged. This isn't too weird for you. Yeah, I'm just going with it. Yeah. Yeah. It's a, yeah. So I'm kind of, you know.
I know what he got in my head. The moment he said that, I mean, I like it's like
Air hockey.
Is this making sense, or is this kind of nutty? It's not nutty. Okay, that's great. Yeah, okay. But I once went on a journey down the Wanganui River in New Zealand. Well, I took the journey 3 times. It was so amazing, with a Maori tribe, group of Maori people who I was connected to, and it was fabulous. You know, we did it for 3 days. You know, and you start canoeing down the river, and you know, the 3rd time I went with my son, who was 18 then, and you know, he starts off, you know, after a few hours, you think, I'm going to do this for 3 days? This is, you know, but by the 2nd day, you want to do it forever. You don't want it to stop. You're just going down the river. It's just so beautiful. And I remember the guy, the sort of team leader, the chief, was called Baldy. And he was Baldy because he had masses of hair. That was a joke. And Baldy said, when we canoe, we feel, you know, you tune in, you sit in the canoe. Maybe probably all canoeists do this. I don't know. You sit there and you kind of tune in to about a foot beneath you, and then you can feel the flow of the river. And I think it's the same with the magic carpet. And what's that saying? Well, what that is talking about, I think, is you know, not I, but the wind that blows through me. I wish I could remember the rest of the poem. It's a poem that by somebody. And not I, but the wind that blows through me. And it's that fundamental posture, you could say, of the mystic, who is saying, you know, there's something greater than me, there's something greater than my ego, myself, that's kind of working through me. And is there a way that I can be sufficiently relaxed and comfortable with myself to let go of my preoccupation with myself sufficiently to let the wind blow through me, and then the carpet starts to lift off, and the wind starts to carry you. And it's a way that is not a way of mortification. There are people who try to do that through mortification. On the plane, I saw this amazing film called The Novitiate. Have you seen that? The Novitiate. It's about a young woman who wants to become a nun. And, you know, as you start watching the film, you start to think, has this been funded by the Catholic Church? Because it's very, you know, it's friendly towards the church. But I won't spoil the story. It's very moving, and worth sticking it out because it really builds. And but of course their way is the way of mortification, and so you know they're taking the discipline stress. And I'm not, to be clear, I'm not saying that isn't a way of getting something, because it obviously is for some people. When Stephanie and I were invited to a meeting at the headquarters of Opus Dei in Rome, the people there were utterly charming, and they were people who would use the discipline every day. They would be beating themselves, and so it seemed to work for them. They were truly really nice people, and people say, yes, but they love bombing you know, and you know, so I don't know, but they were very pleasant with us, and but I suppose there's some Druids who use the discipline, but they're probably having fun with it rather than mortifying. That's the difference, I think. I mean, you're not supposed to enjoy it. But the carpet will lift off without any of that. You don't have to. And there's something about this extraordinary interplay between intention, volition, and abandonment that it is at the heart of the process. So in the one sense, you can look at, you know, all that we do requires volition and intention, you know, because, you know, you have to make a decision to get on a train for 2 days, you have to, you know, there's all sorts of acts of will you have to engage in order to do this stuff. If you want to meditate, you have to actually, there's lots of willing going on, lots of intention. But then, you know, the trick is to know when to let go. You know. I'm sure there are lots of I'm not a sailor, so I don't have the terminology, but I'm sure there's lots of sailing analogies about kind of tacking into the wind and then knowing when you stop, and then the wind takes you. You know, it's the same thing. Gliding, the same thing. You know, you once you're up there and you get on a thermal, and then you're. And so all, you know, such a lot of what we do is kind of taxiing, and getting into position, and I think what happens is the way that process of taxiing onto the runway, getting into position to catch the current, you know, to get the lift off. The way it happens for most people is it's happening at another level, where you spend your whole life trying to get comfortable. So. You know that thought process that, you know, I guess we all go through, which goes like this. Why aren't I happy? Well, it's because I just need to fix this. There's something I need to do. And it's get married, get divorced, you know, fix the roof. The list is endless. And then you know that tragically transient sense of satisfaction that you get, you know, like it's like clearing your email tray. And you actually manage to clear it, and you have that lovely, it feels so good, and it's so brief. You know, or you fixed the house, and then Stephanie will say to me, "We've got to have the house repainted." So you repaint the house, and you think, "This is wonderful," and then the drains go or something like that. But you're kind of manoeuvring your way to feel comfortable in some sort of existential way all the time. The bardic tradition has been sort of distilled into an exercise. I don't know if you've heard the Ernest Hemingway 6-word exercise. Mm-hmm. He was in a bar, wasn't he? And he had a bet with somebody, what's the shortest story you can write? And he said within 6 words. And do you remember the story he came up with?
For sale, baby shoes, never worn.
Yeah. And it's got everything in it, hasn't it? It's got a punch to it, it's moving, it's sad, and the BBC and the NPR or something did a whole thing of inviting people to
6 weeks.
And there was one, was it? Spent my whole life, it's one too many, trying to get comfortable. I don't know, something like that. Yeah. We should have some bardic contests. 6-word storytelling.
The party was great, then Bob.
Sorry?
The party was great, then Bob.
That's right. So we could let me get the animal oracle, and these this analogy I used, or metaphor, whatever it was, of the wind lifting up the carpet. It's like if you wanted to say, what do you mean by this wind? I mean, you could say in a general sense it's the spirit, it's Arwen. But it's also the whispering in the trees. It can be a perfume. There can be 1,000 ways in which somehow you start to lift up. And one of the ways to use an oracle is in that sense, that you just get this intimation from the other world, if you like, from another level. It just gives you some insight, some feeling, and it may be an idea, maybe a word, or it may be just an energy, a quality. And so, if you hold on to your carpets while I get the cards. Like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Isn't that fabulous, And in some sort of workshops, people cry at that moment, And you notice the way she says the family of things. And that's so significant. She's not saying the family of beings, things, so she's including, the things that we create, the jewelry, the clothes, this whole family of life around us. It's so inclusive, it's wonderful. And of course, the thing about the goose is it's the highest flying bird. The Canada goose flies at, what is it? How high is it? Is it 20,000 feet? It's so high. I've never understood why it doesn't freeze and then just sort of land in your garden, ready to go into the oven. How come it doesn't freeze up this? It's so high up. I don't know, but it doesn't freeze. And at the same time, there's nothing more earthy than seeing a goose waddling around a farmyard.
There was some up here.
Yeah, there was some here. That's right. So there's that ability to engage with the world of matter and engage with the world of spirit. So we began our session together, going into the spirit world, if you like, becoming aware of the inner world of the sacred grove, and then I invited us to also be here present in the circle physically. You know, so that's working with the qualities of the goose. You know, fly high and be able to be comfortable in both realms. So gradually, as you do more and more of this work, you develop a facility, an ability to dance, to move between the worlds, and to close your eyes and to connect deep in, to open, engage with somebody, and to move fluidly between the worlds. And the relationship between the body and the spirit or the soul is something that it talks about as well. That this you know, which is what the film The Novitiate speaks about too, in a very strong way. And so yes. So at the end of these Grove meetings above the Golden Egg, there would then be, you know, if there was anything pressing to talk about, if there was anything, we're coming to an end now, so we won't go into a whole Q&A thing. But if there's anything anybody wants to say, or question or something brief, by all means say something. If there's anything you're sitting on or you want to say, no, you're okay. So
Thanks for joining us.
That's a pleasure. Yeah, it's a pleasure. So that's great, and then we would finish. And so we finish by just, as we sit here looking around the circle, we just allow any kind of residual sense of being in the sacred grove. We allow our sense of the sacred grove to fade, so that we're just fully conscious and fully present here. We're aware of the fact that sacredness is always here, but our consciousness is now fully located in the present time, present space. And we stand up. And I give thanks to the spirits of earth and of sky, the spirits of the four directions, the spirits of this special land, this special place. We give thanks for your blessings, your guidance, your inspiration.
I love the moon moves like that.
The moon's out too. And we give thanks for the blessing of the moon and the sun.
All right.
A little wonky one, but that's okay. And we standing together in this circle, we swear by peace and love to stand,
heart to heart and hand to hand. Mark, O Spirit, hear us now, confirming this our sacred vow. We swear by peace and love to stand, heart to heart and hand to hand. Mark, O Spirit, and hear us now, confirming this our sacred vow. We swear by peace and love to stand, heart to heart and hand in hand. Mark, O Spirit, and hear us now, confirming this our sacred vow.
This meeting ends in peace, as in peace began. May there be peace inward and up until the meeting. Good. Thank you.